What if I told you that trust for doctors was at almost an all-time low? Would you be surprised? What if I told you it wasn't their fault? Well, we're going to be talking about this and so much more in this episode of All Things LOCS. Now, we're going to start this conversation by really kind of diving into some of the misconceptions that are going on in healthcare right now. Obviously, it's a hot topic. You have between RFK coming in to the Department of Health and just the misconceptions around doctors and medicine. So I'm going to kind of kick this off a little bit. You know, me and Antonio are going to be on this episode really discussing some of the challenges that doctors are actually facing. Some of it is factual. Some of it is getting blown out of proportion. Now, Antonio, you've obviously grown up around family members that are in healthcare. So I'm just curious to know, from a layman's terms, where you're not actually practicing, how does it make you feel to see people really questioning doctors at such a high level and really trying to find their own way to getting themselves healthy these days?
Well, I think first and foremost is that we're in an age of information, is that we're getting inundated with things now more than we've ever have before. And when we look at our own quality of life, we think about money, we think about relationships, but we also think about, like, our own bodies. People start to feel numb. People go to work. People feel like, they're always exhausted. They're tired. They're groggy. They're fatigued. They're not focused. It's all over the place. So what's a natural tendency to do is, like, you want to self-diagnose here a little bit, right? So this is kind of where we see it in the business world, but we also see it just in health and in fitness and also in wellness, is like, all right, how can I do a little change here? And you start going down this rabbit hole of, like, high fructose corn syrup. You start going down this rabbit hole of, like, caffeine parameters. You start going down this rabbit hole of, like, what's in our food. And then it's like you start flipping these rocks, and then you're looking at, like, all right, well, where does this information come from? And it's like, doctors, like, they recommended this shit. It's like, and then you're starting things being overturned, things being flipped, things being exposed. So it's kind of natural to look at a doctor and be like, are you sure that this is the right thing? Because I'm seeing so much information out there that there's people with similar symptoms that have overcome their ailments, maybe doing it in a different way. And it's not just from our country's perspective, but this is global. It's like, what is India doing? What is South Korea doing? What is Japan doing? What's China doing? What's European countries doing that maybe don't have strict regulations on stuff? So I think that age of information is kind of pulling back the curtain, and it's making you question, maybe not the doctor directly of, like, you're trying to fuck me over or you're trying to do this, even though that there's a lot of situations where that does happen. But you're kind of asking, like, wait a minute, you're a doctor. How many nutrition classes did you take? How many fitness classes did you take? How well versed are you on this thing? And it's like, oh, so you were pretty conditioned or educated to deliver on this sliver of health. It's like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And that's kind of in alignment of what maybe insurance companies want. So I think that's the biggest thing, is, like, we're in the age of information. And the thing that really blew the lid off of that, I would say, is COVID, these last 4 years. I think public trust before that to now is on a whole different ballgame. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that is where a lot of this started. And in reality, what I feel like people don't quite understand with doctors, and you kind of touched on a little bit, is, like, we tend to look at doctors as, everything about the human body. It's like, all right, you're a proctologist.
Like, no.
Yeah, it's like, you're a proctologist, so you must know about the neck too, right? It's like, nah, that's not how this works. And like you said, they're not getting nutrition nutrition classes, I should say. Like, their scope is within what they went to school for. They're not all encompassing. But I feel like a lot of times we just look at doctors, maybe how they used to be 100 years ago, where that was, like, your go-to for everything. And it's just, things have gotten specialized.
Do you feel like a lot of it is, like, maybe an authority play too?
No, I don't think it's that as much. I mean, it's just, medicine, like I said, has gotten very specialized in the sense of you have different doctors for everything now related to the human body. So there's no more, even you might go to a primary care doctor. They have some general knowledge, but they're going to definitely more often than not say, go see a specialist, depending upon what you're going to see them for. And that's where healthcare has gotten a little bit more segmented, so to speak. But then people expect, hey, if you're a doctor, you should know everything, right? You're smart. You went to school for that long. Like, what were you doing there? And then they look at the doctor. They have the expectations. And I think that's where a lot of this trust aspect comes in, outside of what happened with COVID where, all right, you're recommending this, the research, however you want to look at how extensive the research was, they want to say, well, you did it, so it's you. So I can't trust medicine, I can't trust healthcare, even though, again, we go by, as society, we go by what we learned and how we're taught, right? So if you're a doctor and you grew up fundamentally understanding that something helps people, you're going to recommend that something. Now, you might say, well, and in this case, it was vaccines, right? So you're going to say it helps, the science proved that it helps. Maybe the way we went about establishing this one was different, but it's also different times, right? So I think that's where people, there's not enough nowadays, not enough conversation going on.
You made a really good comment about expectations of like there's public expectations that when you're in this particular career, like you should know these things here.
Yes.
How much of it do you feel like could be social media? So yeah, doctors also having platforms. They're like, hey man, like the way that I help this person with shingles or help this person with such and such. How much of it is like social media where like they do have like a big megaphone?
Actually, I think it's the opposite. I really look at it as, and I really feel for doctors, and it's not just because I'm in healthcare, but they're really under it, and they're trying to operate in their best possible sense. Social media has been the biggest spreader of, it's like anything else, biggest spreader of misinformation. Now, where people in healthcare, and especially doctors, could do themselves a favor is by being more vocal on social media, right? And like I'll go on social media, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, I don't see much. I'll go on Twitter, I see some doctors who are giving facts about, and we'll get into some things related to, insurance and their own salaries. But there are some people out there, but I'm like, considering how many doctors are practicing, it's like nothing. So, people go with what they are blasted with all the time, right? It's like, so if you're on social media and you see the same messaging over and over again, the one random post from one random doctor in Wisconsin is not going to change your perception about doctors.
I wonder, do you think there's a liability factor in here where like doctors may not want to put themselves to be more, like just to be more vocal because because it could backfire, be like, oh, you said this, and
no, I don't think it's that. I just think it's like any, if you look at, and I've done this too, is like you go on social media, how many of us are out there not posting certain things or saying certain things because you're like, who's gonna attack me today? What scumbag is gonna launch into me and then like spread misinformation? And honestly, like even for me when I was practicing, it's stuff like I was always in the back of my head, not about posting, but even getting a review that somebody says something. I'm like, that the ability to then go on Facebook or Instagram and start writing some bullshit, because again, it's all a matter of how we feel, right? You didn't take good enough care of me, you didn't help me, but they're not saying, hey, by the way, I didn't do anything that the doctor recommended. Like, or if you're going to say like maybe a physical therapist, well, I stopped after 2 weeks even though I should have kept going. I didn't do anything at home to help. I didn't change my diet. And then you want to fucking blame the doctor. Well, they're not saying that on social media. They just say what makes them feel better. So it's always in the back of whether you're a medical doctor or a healthcare provider, that is 100% always in the back of their head, which is, if I speak up, will I get attacked? Because there is no conversation.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Just to establish some things around like misinformation, like that's like kind of a very current new term.
Yes.
Right. And so it's interesting because you can have there's peer reviewed data,
Yep.
there's stuff that's new.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, what qualifies as that? Is like just because it's not established, or is it because like just someone else said it and it's against against the status quo or whatever it is? It's like, what qualifies as that? And like, how quick should we even label it misinformation? And is that even a really good word to use when we're trying to figure out like, dude, things change?
Yeah. No, it's not appropriate, because again, to your point,
especially now, things have changed since COVID. Like more things are like, hey, maybe there is a little bit of a difference here. There is some situations where we thought one thing over there was misinformation.
Yeah.
Actually turns out to be true later. We just saw it now, I think, with a certain dye is now, for years it was studied. This is safe. This is good. And now it's banned because of cancer.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of what goes on in medicine is research based. Which, again, going back to COVID, that was the argument, which is how could you spend enough time researching something that normally takes years and you guys got it done in months? So I get that aspect. But just in general, a lot of what doctors are recommending is based on good science. And that's really the discussion that is to be had nowadays, without kind of going too far to the side here, is that science is like realistically being attacked on some levels in this country. That you have data, good data, not like some bullshit. Like if you got sick and I studied you and cured you, it's like, look, my treatment works. One person doesn't matter. But when you have studies that are done on hundreds or thousands of people, that shit is proven. And then you have, regular good old lay people, and they're like, no, I don't believe it. Like, you present people with facts, and that's just a society issue where it's like you present with facts, and fucking people still like, I don't believe it. Well, show me the data. Here's the data. So I still don't believe it.
So it's one thing to look at data, and it's one thing to like interpret data.
Yep.
Right. How much of it's like I think a big chunk of it is being educated enough to know what you're looking at. Right. One of the examples that I give even with businesses is like if someone filled out or gave you like a report on the KPIs of your business, it's like, do you know what these numbers mean and how they affect you? It's like no different than if you do a blood panel on someone and it's like 9 pages long. You're like, here you go, check this out. You're like, I don't know what any of this stuff means. What's HDL? What's this cholesterol? What is that high? Is that low? What does this mean? And so you can still obtain like pages and pages and pages of data, and you can give it to a doctor that can see that and be like, dude, I can poke so many holes in this thing. And you give it to kind of like just a regular average Joe, and they're like, I don't even know how to interpret this to figure out if I should move in a certain direction or not, because they're the ones that are struggling with a particular ailment. Yeah. So how much of this do you feel like it's the public's responsibility that, like, I look at this very similar to financial literacy, is like there's a certain point in life where you got to get good with money and you got to get good with understanding finances. How much weight do you place on people that you got to educate yourself on this stuff because it's your body, it's your vessel? So
the challenge is not necessarily lack of information. Like, obviously we have enough information out there.
There's a lot of information.
Yeah, right. Which is, I think, could be part of the problem too. It's like trying to find something to watch on fucking TV. It's like, all right, I have like 5 streaming platforms. Like, too many options, too many things.
I just go back to the same thing.
Yeah, it's like
Star Wars, Phantom Menace.
Yeah, or like
for
back
the 80 billionth time.
Back to the 80s when we had like 6 channels. But at the end of the day too, though, it's the ability to educate yourself a bit, and then B, more importantly, what I always tell people is ask questions. Now, and what I mean by that is when you're seeing a doctor, have questions prepared. Now, I know the flip side will be, I don't get any time to fucking ask any questions. And then when I do ask my doctor questions, I'm met with defensiveness or attitude.
Oh, yeah, we get that a lot.
Yeah, and that's 100%. So there are some doctors, again, a large majority of doctors are fucking phenomenal. But there are those doctors that, I think we've talked about in our past episodes where they have a little bit of ego, potentially some God complex, and it's like, who the hell are you to question me as the doctor? So I get that. And then people, it's a big turnoff. So the best thing doctors can do is to really just be able to allow patients the time to ask some questions. And I get it. From a doctor's perspective, they might be saying, some of the questions I get asked are just so stupid and ridiculous. It's going to happen, right? It's like we have to evolve. It's 2025. You mentioned just 2 minutes ago, like we have more information nowadays than ever before, which means we have more questions to ask. So it's the best thing you can do is just give them some time, give them the facts, answer their questions, be empathetic, and I would solve a lot of this.
That's a good kind of segue into when people are asking certain questions, because sometimes usually the questions sometimes might be around like the prescription of like, hey, this is what you have and this is how we fix it. Or this is what you have and this is a path to get better. And part of those questions is, are you incentivized with any of of this prescription or this path here, like with this particular drug or this thing or maybe that? And because playing a little bit of devil's advocate is like, yes, there might be something that, yes, I do get incentivized, but it's a thing that's going to help versus giving you a particular path to health that doesn't need to be, but I get paid a lot of money as a doctor. Oh,
no, there's 100%. Like there are definitely doctors out there. And again, like we have to also understand when we're saying it as doctors, it's, you can't just say, well, it's all of them, right? Because we do have a tendency as people to just generalize everything, right? It's like every doctor, it's like, all right, it's not every doctor. You've been to 2. So let's stop saying every doctor. But there are doctors 100% you get a marketing person from a drug company come in and say, use this and we'll pay you X amount. So there are some doctors, again, minimal, that'll keep kind of pushing pills. Like I've been around them. It's like you just expect, all right, what kind of medication did the doctor prescribe this time? Versus, and this is where a lot of people get frustrated, versus trying to figure out the root cause of the problem. You know, and I see that a lot with like inflammatory conditions where it's just like, all right, take this, you're on anti-inflammatories now for the rest of your life. And then it's like, can we figure out why I'm having
inflammation?
Yeah, like inflammation, like what's actually causing, you know, my arthritis to flare up, my psoriatic arthritis or whatever it is. It's like, no, I don't do that. I just tell you what's wrong and then give you something to cover the symptoms. Like, and that's what people are getting pissed off and frustrated. It's like, dude, like even my mom, like she went to a doctor and she actually did have a bad reaction to a COVID booster. I mean, she got really fucked up for like 6 months, like really inflamed, was in a lot of pain. And then everything like went down. Like once kind of like took itself out of her system. Then the doctor's like, yeah, you're going to just be on these anti-inflammatories. And she's like, for the rest of my fucking life? And he's like, yeah, more or less. She's like, I don't want to do that. And I'm like, yeah, don't. That's the kind of shit that people look at doctors like, I don't trust you for doing that. Versus like, all right, how about we give it some time, or is there any other options? That's being able to look outside the box, I think, is where people are like, all right, can you give me some other options, even if you're not the expert? So to your point about like business, I could easily come to you like, hey, I have an IT issue, or I need like a system upgrade. Can you help me do that? Pretty sure you'd be like, I can't do that, but I can refer you to somebody who can.
Because it would be equivalent, like if you had an IT issue and then like I own the server that you're paying me to use to run your business, and you're asking me, are there other ways of running my business outside of the server? So like, what do you think that IT person's going to do? Is like, no, you want us to stay here because like that's my income.
Yep.
So so is it justified with this common perception, you know, with, you know, doctors making bank, they drive luxury cars, they live in mansions and retire early, or do they really? Or are they crippled with other things that are pressuring them to potentially make questionable calls with patients?
Yeah. I don't think it's necessarily a question. So I love that. Again, it's a perception, right? Every doctor is, you know, fucking loaded. But then if that's what you think, that's why I like, you know, I look at, for me personally, I love data that's clear and paints a really good picture. And what I mean by that is, if doctors were killing it, then why are so many doctors quitting the field? Why are so many doctors selling their practice and joining up with the larger institutions? And that's the reality of what's happening. You know, doctors have a high level of entrepreneurship. It's actually decreasing. So
it's by quite a bit. I
Yeah.
think, what was it, like over 130,000 doctors are looking to probably exit the market in the next.
they're looking to quit, but just the amount of doctors who are opening their own practices is actually going down.
That's reducing.
Yeah.
People leaving hospitals to do that is reducing.
So common sense says people don't leave jobs overall. People don't leave jobs where they're making a shit ton of money. Like, it's just human nature. Like, you talk to most people like, why would I leave? I'm making like $500,000 or $250,000. So the reality,
the additional to that to that component is like they're making a lot of money, but they're not destroying themselves in the process.
Yeah.
So if they're running a business and they're making a ton of money and you can coast with that, no one will ever leave that. But if you're making a ton of money, but you're losing your soul and destroying yourself and you're burning out, it's like people will leave that all day long, which is what's happening.
Yeah, that's definitely what's happening. And the other thing too is that we don't take into account how much debt these people have coming out of school, right? It's just like, oh, you're making a lot of money. It's like, dude, I have $300,000 or more in debt. Like, how long is that going to take to pay off, right? So the reality of it is like, hey, you might be doing well, but then, you know, in reality, like, everybody's concept of doing well is differently, right? I mean, I remember, oh my God, I don't know, it was like 6 or 8 months ago, Grant Cardone threw out a comment like, if you're making under $400,000 in the U.S., like, the hell are you doing? Different perception by somebody who's insanely wealthy, but it's like a lot of these doctors are making, you know, $250,000 or less. And then they're, like, to a point, working a shit ton of hours. So if you look at what do we make hourly, because that's a fun game to play, right? It's like, oh, I'm making this much, but it's like, yeah, but you're working like 80 hours. So how much you making hourly? It's not that much. And then you look at other professions. Like, there was a doctor who was posting something about lawyer salaries. It's like 500, 600. It's like way more. And then other professions, way more hourly. So it's like you got to look at different things. And that's why I'm like, for people who are not in medicine, the best thing to do is just, when we want to educate ourselves, is educate yourself about the shit that you're complaining about. before you actually complain about it.
So there's two sides to that. So one of them is educating yourself on your body, on what could be needed.
Yep.
And the other side of it is also educating you on how the money system in healthcare works through insurance or through cash or whatever else. Because that education is going to determine how you even approach the doctor based off of what they're giving you.
Yeah.
Whether it is a anti-inflammatory or it's a procedure, anything like that. I think that's a really, really big one. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, obviously a lot of us who are not in medicine, we get, like even for us in medicine, we get frustrated plenty of times with healthcare, but the real frustration more so is not anything the doctors are doing per se. A lot of it has to boil down with decisions that are being made secondary to what's being dictated by insurance companies. And the problem is, you and me or anybody, we're not going to spend fucking hours on the phone usually calling up Medicare or United Healthcare just to have our gripes and complain about shit. So you go after the person who is the easiest target. And that's the person right in front of you, which is usually a doctor. Right? So they're trying to do what's best for you more often than not, trying to get stuff approved, trying to deliver good care. And anything that's going against you, it's not their fault for the most part. Yeah, maybe the documentation got a little screwed up, but for the most part, it's a insurance issue. It's just that we you got to blame somebody. You want to attack somebody. The easy target is the person right in front of you, which is the doctor.
Yeah. So just to kind of button that side of things up is that you could very well have a doctor that has been trained by a system, by an educational system that almost leaves out very key things for health, especially around nutrition, fitness, things like that, right? So they're coming in with an education that is narrower, and because we're living in the age of information, is we can kind of find out some of those gaps. And we could also learn what other people have done to fix their own ailments. So now you're talking to a doctor and you're saying hey, maybe this could work or this could work. And they could very well even not know about it because they've been trained in another place. Sure. And that's not even including the squeeze that they may feel financially with their own clinic, because insurance denials are getting higher and higher and higher, which could force people to do different things in front of this patient.
Yeah.
And oftentimes with a clinic is well, if that's what's happening, what is the natural tendency with doctors to try to fix this? If money is going down because of the insurance denials, it's to get more patients.
Yeah.
And if you're flooding your clinic with more patients, what ends up happening is that you're reducing the time of each interaction, which means less opportunity to have those conversations and explore what could actually be the issue. To your point with your mom is here's an anti-inflammatory, it's probably gonna be the rest of your life. All right, thanks, bye, next. And you're golly, there's a better avenue to this. But it goes back again, the doctors may not even know any better. That's just kind of...
That's how you're trained, right? Let's call it what it is. We all do things based on, for the most part, how we're taught. Even our own biases and opinions, we didn't create that ourselves. Usually it's what was taught to us. So if you're in school for, multiple years, you're going to have a different a way of doing things. The mentality of a lot of doctors is very analytical. Mm-hmm. So it's you're dealing with that kind of stuff. Now, again, I will say there are, doctors have to take continuing education classes. So for those areas that maybe they could improve, hey, if I'm a general practitioner or maybe an orthopedic doctor, all right, maybe I can learn a little bit about nutrition. But again, who's the expert? I'm not the expert on nutrition. So can I direct you to somebody who is? That's really what it comes down to. And then to your point about we're getting reimbursed less, so we have to see more patients. Then there's the other aspect of, do you have somebody in ownership, leadership that's maybe putting a little pressure on you to, hey, we need you to maybe do some more procedures, or we need more follow-ups even when they're not necessary. That's the kind of stuff. It's man, I don't think the patient really needs this, but I'm getting a lot of heat. And again, human nature is we want to make things as easy as possible for ourselves, right?
Just this one patient.
Yeah, so it's all right, they don't really need it, but it's not going to hurt them. So instead of my boss busting my ass and yelling at me, I'd rather just do it and honestly make my life easier knowing I'm not really hurting the patient. So it's just stuff that it gets done that maybe is unnecessary that you wouldn't recommend under normal circumstances.
So there's an underlying thing about collaboration between doctors and maybe other places they could refer to. So when we're thinking about the a real solution here where doctors are stuck between a system that could be limiting them and patients who don't trust them. What are some other solutions that these practitioners can adopt just to make sure they're running their business a little better?
I mean, look, I think it's like anything else, right? When you look at trust in any relationship, it's going to be, do you have open communication? Are you transparent? Do you, right? If we think about, like, for those of you who like have great relationships, it's like, what makes those relationships great? It's like we listen to each other, we talk, we give each other a platform. I try my best to understand where they're coming from. I do what I say I'm going to do. So really, it's giving patients the platform. That's what's ultimately going to help, is really just being empathetic, which is actually one of the hardest skills for a lot of doctors to develop, even though it's a skill set that patients are most often looking for. So it's very interesting, because you would think that should be like the highest skill set for everybody in medicine, and it's not.
Why do you think that is, that empathy is, even though it's so weird? It's like, if you're in the military, you should be strong and great cardio, but they have the worst cardio. Is like, that doesn't make any sense. So if you're empathetic, or this is an industry where you should be extremely empathetic, but some are not. Like, why is that?
I mean, it's just I think it's the personalities of the people who are going into the field. Again, you have a lot of individuals who are very analytical, science-based, kind of just do things step by step. Great people still, but that's their mindset. So it's going to be hard for that person just emotionally to be that really soft, understanding person. And then you have, on the flip side, a lot of doctors who are a little bit more controlling, a little more dominant, like that strong personality, and it's the same thing. So if we're looking at something like a DISC personality assessment, right, you'd have your high Ds, and that's honestly like me. It's like I tend to be very controlling. I've gotten way better at it. But it's just very hard for those people to relate and connect. So if that's your natural standpoint, unless you're working on it, which most people don't.
If anything, that's a good direction, because like people, even though they might be wired in a certain direction, right, using DISC, like, these are still things that you can work on.
Correct.
That you can work on. So how much of it is actually just an inherent personality style, and how much of it is just like lack of training?
It's both. I mean, really, a lot of it is just the natural style. You know, I mean, I can speak for myself, but this is just people in general. Like, I have to work on myself every single day, or else I will slip up. And my wife can attest to that. Like, I've gotten to know myself, to know that I'm controlling, I'm dominant. I can be selfish sometimes, and it's like, I know that, and I'm aware of it at all points. Most people are not going to go that deep into understanding themselves. So as much of it, a lot of it is personality, but then to your point, we're not learning any of these skills in school. And it's not just a doctor issue. Like, if you're on social media, you see enough articles about Gen Z, and it's the same shit. It's like they don't have any emotional awareness, like no emotional intelligence. It's like, well, we don't have it, but if you're not training people, how are they ever going to get better at it? So there is that aspect of it. And even people, doctors will straight up tell you, like, we need this, but schools are not supplying it.
Yeah, I think that's very, very true, where it's kind of like what we talked a little bit earlier about data. Once we get the data, it's interpreting the data and then responding to the data of seeing whether this makes sense for us. And I think it's the same way with people, that you can have somebody in front of you and it's like, I don't get this guy. I don't get this chick. I don't understand, like, why are they like this? And whereas somebody else, they could say, oh, they're dominant, or they're influencing, or they're steadiness, or whatever it is, right? And they can pick apart that person quickly, and they're also able to adjust and be versatile, so they can have a positive interaction. And what I'm hearing is that if there's members in the healthcare community that were able to adopt those skill sets, they're going to have better patient outcomes, simply because the patient feels heard and understood, and you can calm down a situation, you can escalate a situation, you can do way more things there that are actually pretty free, that end up people getting more of a word of mouth, a little bit more virality, because now if you're having better quality, like, even though your quality, that patient interaction is thinner or it's shorter, but the quality is high.
Correct.
Then those people are far more likely to refer, to speak of the heavens. They're able to send people off in your direction, write a positive testimonial, and those things bring back more people just by having those soft skills developed. And quite frankly, I think once people learn about this stuff, I think that that's really the key, because it adds that human element back into healthcare, where sometimes in some places it could be missing.
Yeah, I mean, in healthcare and just in general, a lot of problems could be solved by just asking some fucking open-ended questions like, hey, what concerns you? How do you feel about this? Like little things like that we just, why would I ever ask them? It's like, that is what you're trying to do, is understand people and to try to figure out where they're coming from, right? Because again, we're all different. So even if you take, I don't know how to navigate personalities, it's like, that's fine. Just ask some questions.
100%.
So I think the other thing too, when we're looking at this is, outside of all the perceptions and, where doctors can get better at having, real strong conversations, is just in general, like you said before, like people need to educate themselves on both sides, right? Doctors could definitely educate themselves about, how do I connect better with people? How do I, if I wasn't a doctor, how would I feel about doctors, right? So it's like putting yourself in that other person's shoes. And then from the general public, learning about what is actually going on. Like what happens if doctors are actually getting paid less from insurance? What happens if there's more denials and more reimbursement cuts? Like what kind of pressure does that put on people? And again, it's just factoring in, like, they have a livelihood too. They have maybe a family. It's like, all right, what kind of pressure does that put on that person? And if we think about any job that we have, if year over year your boss came to you and said, by the way, I'm going to deduct your pay instead of increasing 3 to 5%, I want to know who the fuck who would be okay with that? Like none of us, right? Would be like, why would I work here? And these doctors are still showing up to work to help, and then they're getting fucking destroyed on Twitter and just roasted in the clinic for shit that people don't understand. So, I really just, I want people to really just educate yourselves in the right way. And the biggest, one of my biggest frustrations with people in general that I feel we need to do better, not we have to, is just taking the time to be open-minded, sit down and have discussions with people. And there's a lot of tribalism going on. There's a lot of me against you kind of bullshit that needs to stop. And we just need to be able to do what we're doing here, which is have dialogue and understand each other. And understand doesn't mean I have to agree with you, but it's, all right, let me at least try to see your side of it and understand this. And that's the biggest aspect, is we're not taking the time to really understand each other.
I love it.
So I think that's all I got for you, man. It's just, the education aspect. Thanks, Sophia. We're going to cut that out. So let's take a break. We're going to do a different close. I think that's a good ending right there.
Yeah, I love it, man.
What's that?
Yeah, I love it, man.
Yeah. Hey, Sophia.
It's Sophia, not Sophia. Get it right.
Is there a way to, like, I don't know if you want to do a playback, or we kind of didn't really have a great ending there, obviously. So we just want to kind of see where's the point where I kind of stop talking and then just cut that, and then we'll do a close off.
There's no way to play that without unplugging him. I gotta stop recording everything and then we can start computing.
Yeah, we can stop recording, and then because even if we get it, we can cut it at that marker anyway.
So it's just one file. You have an editor, right? Who's pushing this? Are we pushing this?
You guys are.
Oh, okay. I'll explain it then.
Yeah, okay. All right, so we could just we'll just do the end? All right. Yeah, it works.
You're good. We're still recording whenever you're ready.
Let's do the closeout. You? Yep.
Yes, okay. So I think it was all right, just educate yourself. So the best thing I would say for people to do is just to educate themselves, be open to dialogue, have conversations, learn from other people, and honestly, a lot of these issues would go right away. So that's what I'm going to leave you guys. Antonio, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, if you're a doctor and you're listening to this and you feel like, you know what, they kind of described me, I just want you guys to know that this is not your fault. Oftentimes we can kind of beat ourselves up, and with where you're at, it's a reflection of the environment. So if you're feeling this way and you want to improve, connect with us, click on the link below. We'd love to help you out. And till next time.